No hat today because it's a serious topic. The longevity of democracy in the United States is at stake today. So a year after the January 6th, 2021 Capitol insurrection, there finally have been sedition charges, which would be, sedition is when you would attempt to overthrow the government in some way. And now we have the leader of the Oath Keepers, Elmer Stewart Rhodes III, and others being charged with seditious conspiracy. And we're going to go over the facts and allegations that are behind this, starting with how these charges are being brought by a grand jury. A grand jury would be a panel of citizens or jurists that is commissioned by a prosecutor. The grand jury will subpoena witnesses and evidence and review the available evidence and testimony, and then decide what charges to bring. So it takes some of the pressure off of a prosecutor. If the prosecutor isn't sure how actual citizens would respond to something, they can convene a grand jury. A grand jury is not overseen by a judge. It's actually the prosecution. So when they say that a grand jury was sworn in on January 8th, 2021, they've been investigating this for the past year, and now they are bringing an indictment. And they start with an introduction about the transfer of presidential power, which I realize might sound a little boring, but just bear with me because this is going to be built upon later. The United States Constitution and various federal statutes codify the procedures and dates governing the transfer of presidential power in the United States. The 12th Amendment requires presidential electors to meet in their respective states and certify distinct lists of all persons voted for as president and of all persons voted for as vice president and the number of votes for each. It further requires that the vice president shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. Title III, Section 15 of the United States Code provides that the U.S. Congress must convene during a joint session at 1 p.m. on the 6th day of January, succeeding every meeting of the electors, with the vice president presiding to count the electoral votes, resolve any objections, certify their validity, and announce the result. The 20th Amendment provides that the terms of the president and vice president shall accordingly end at noon on the 20th day of January, and the terms of their successors shall begin. After the election, Elmer Stewart Rhodes III conspired with his co-defendants introduced below and other co-conspirators to oppose by force the lawful transfer of presidential power. Rhodes, a resident of Granbury, Texas, was the founder and leader of the Oath Keepers, a large but loosely organized collection of individuals, some of whom are associated with militias. Some members of the Oath Keepers believe that the federal government has been co-opted by a cabal of elites actively trying to strip American citizens of their rights. Though the Oath Keepers will accept anyone as members, they explicitly focus on recruiting current and former military, law enforcement, and first responder personnel. The organization's name alludes to the oath sworn by members of the military and police to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. On their website, the Oath Keepers declare they will not obey unconstitutional orders. And we're going to go to count one, which is seditious conspiracy. In criminal law, a conspiracy is an agreement between two or more persons to commit a crime at some point in the future. So not the same thing as a conspiracy theory, but more so when people work in coordination to break the law, that can be considered aiding and abetting or a conspiracy. Likewise, a seditious conspiracy is when two or more persons try to overthrow the government. By conspiring to overthrow, put down, or destroy by force the government of the United States, levy war against them, or oppose by force the authority thereof, or to prevent by force, hinder or delay the execution of any law, or seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof. And they shall be fined or imprisoned not more than 20 years, according to this section. Also, a stack formation should look familiar. This is what you see SWAT teams doing on TV. They line up behind each other, keeping hands on to follow each other through a incursion or operation. From in and around November of 2020 through in and around January of 2021, in the District of Columbia and elsewhere, the following defendants, Rhodes, Meigs, Harrelson, Watson, James, Menuda, Hackett, Marshall, Ulrich, Caldwell, and Vallejo, did knowingly conspire, confederate, and agree with other persons known and unknown to the grand jury by force to prevent, hinder, and delay the execution of any law of the United States, charges the grand jury. The purpose of the conspiracy was to oppose the lawful transfer of presidential power by force. They then go into the manner and means, and some of this repeats, so I'm going to go ahead to acts in furtherance of the conspiracy, and this is where we get into the nitty-gritty of what exactly did they do. On November 5th, 2020, 2 days after the presidential election, Rhodes sent a message to an invitation-only, end-to-end encrypted group chat on the application Signal titled Leadership Intel Sharing Secured. They're going to call it the Leadership Intel Chat. In his message, Rhodes urged his followers to refuse to accept the election result and stated, "We aren't getting through this without a civil war. Too late for that. Prepare your mind, body, and spirit." On November 7th, 2020, the date that President Trump was projected to have lost the presidential election, Rhodes wrote to the Leadership Intel Chat, "We must now do what the people of Serbia did when Milosevic stole their election, refuse to accept it and march en masse on the nation's capital." He then sent a link to a BitChute video titled Step-by-Step Procedure, How We Won When Milosevic Stole Our Elections. Rhodes continued, "I am in direct context with the Serbian author of that video. His videos are excellent. Here is his written advice to us. Peaceful protests, good, well played, round one. A complete civil disobedience, they are not your representatives, they are foreign puppet government. Connect with the local police and start organize by neighborhoods to stay safe. We didn't need this step. We swarmed the streets and started confronting the opponents. I know, not nice, but it must be done if the institutions stop to exist. Millions gathered in our capital. There were no barricades strong enough to stop them, nor the police determined enough to stop them. Military and police aligned with the people after a few hours of fist fighting. We stormed the parliament, burned down fake state television. We won." Later, on November 10th, 2020, Rhodes publicly published this plan of action under the headline, What We the People Must Do, on the Oath Keepers website in a call to action. On November 9th, 2020, Rhodes held a private go-to meeting titled Oath Keepers National Call, Members Only. During the meeting, Rhodes outlined a plan to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power, including preparations for the use of force, and urged those listening to participate. Meigs sent a message to an invitation-only Signal group chat titled OKFL Hangout, stating, "Anybody not on the call tonight, we have been issued a call to action for DC. This is the moment we signed up for." Watkins also sent messages to several people whom she referred to in her phone as recruits, informing them about a military-style basic training class her militia was organizing for the beginning of January 2021 to get these recruits fighting fit by inauguration. On November 9th, Caldwell reached out to Rhodes to provide the results of a lengthy recce reconnaissance trip he had taken into Washington, D.C., and to coordinate planning with Rhodes for an upcoming op in Washington, D.C. November 22nd, the Florida chapter of the Oath Keepers held a training on unconventional warfare. December 11th, Rhodes sent a message to a group chat titled December 12th DC Security/Leadership. He stated that if President-elect Biden were to assume the presidency, it will be a bloody and desperate fight. We are going to have a fight. That can't be avoided. December 12th, the North Carolina chapter of the Oath Keepers held a training session that would be focused on vehicle operations, roadblocks, vehicle recovery, convoy operations, setting up hasty ambushes, reacting to ambushes. But the first thing we are going to do is fall into a formation when we assemble. December 14th, the same day presidential electors from each state and the District of Columbia cast their votes in the presidential election, Rhodes published a letter on the Oath Keepers website advocating for the use of force to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power. Ulrich responded, Well, I'm not a soldier, but I'm focused, and I stayed at a Holiday Inn once, so it's game on time. On December 19th, Hackett wrote, I believe we only need to do this when important info is at hand, like locations, identities, ops planning. Attached to the email was a photograph that showed cursive handwriting that stated, rally point in northern Port Charlotte at Gray's if transportation is possible. All Proton mails. Proton is a anonymous email service. May consider an RP that won't burn anyone. Comms, work in progress. Messages in cursive to eliminate digital reads. Plans for recruitment and meetings. December 19th, Menuda messaged another individual. Oathkeeper's president is pretty disheartened. He feels like it's go time. The time for peaceful protest is over in his eyes. I was talking with him last night. December 21st, James posted a message to the Leadership Intel chat stating, Southeast region is creating a national call to action for DC January 6th. 4 states are mobilizing. 3 states are mobilizing to DC. Everyone in this channel should understand the magnitude I just sent. On December 22nd, in an interview with a regional Oath Keepers leader, Rhodes stated that if President-elect Biden were able to assume the presidency, we will have to do a bloody, massively bloody revolution against them. That's what's going to happen. He urged President Trump to use military force to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power, describing January 6, 2021 as a hard constitutional deadline to do so. On December 23rd, Rhodes published another open letter to the Oath Keepers website. He explained, tens of thousands of patriot Americans, both veterans and non-veterans, will already be in Washington, D.C., and many of us will have our mission-critical gear stowed nearby, just outside D.C. Rhodes stated in the open letter that he and others may have to take arms in defense of our God-given liberty. December 25th, Christmas, Megs messaged the OKFL chat, we need to make those senators very uncomfortable with all of us being a few hundred feet away. Rhodes then wrote, I think Congress will screw him, President Trump, over. The only chance he has is if we scare the shit out of them and convince them it will be torches and pitchforks time if they don't do the right thing. On December 26th, a member of Stack 1 attempted to arrange a training class and wrote an email to a Florida company that conducts training on firearms and combat. The Stack 1 member wrote, in part, I trained with you not long ago. Since then I have joined Oath Keepers. I recommended your training to the team. To that effect, 4 of us would like to train with you, specifically in your UTM rifle class. UTM is the Ultimate Training Munitions company or organization, and they make marking rounds. These are, I guess, safe to shoot at each other. I don't have all the details on it, but just looking at it, it looks like these are like little paintballs or something inside 5.56 cartridges or 9mm cartridges that can then be used for training purposes. On December 29th, Watkins texts a co-conspirator, we plan on going to DC on the 6th. December 30th, Rhodes purchased 2 night vision devices and 1 weapons sight for approximately $7,000 and shipped the items to another individual in Virginia near Washington, D.C., where they arrived on January 4th. Rhodes and his co-conspirators used the Leadership Intel chat and other chats to plan for January 6th. On December 31st, at approximately 10:08 p.m., Rhodes wrote, there is no standard political or legal way out of this. December 31st, Ulrich sent messages to the leadership chat relating to firearms. Someone can tell me if I'm crazy, but I'm planning to have a backpack for regular use and then a separate backpack with my ammo loadout with some basics that I can just switch to. Is shit truly the fan blades? Ulrich added, I will be the guy running around with the budget AR. December 31st, Megs sent Facebook messages to another person intending to travel to DC. You guys gonna carry? Okay, we aren't either. We have a heavy QRF quick response force, 10 minutes out though. On December 31st, James received a message which stated, I have friends not far from DC with a lot of weapons and ammo. If you get untrouble, I coordinate help. That might be helpful, but we have a shitload of QRF on standby with an arsenal. Also, December 31st, an Arizona QRF team member messaged Rhodes that the team member Vallejo and others were coming to Washington, D.C., and that everyone coming has their own technical equipment and knows how to use it, adding a winky face emoji. Rhodes responded, "Awesome." The Arizona QRF team member also said that the group would have rifles and manpower. In late December, Caldwell identified the Comfort Inn Ballston in Arlington, Virginia, as the location that the QRF would use as its base of operations for January 6th. Caldwell shared the location of the hotel with Watkins and the QRF team leader for the North Carolina Oath Keepers group that traveled to D.C. for January 6th. The North Carolina QRF team leader reserved 3 rooms. One room was occupied by the North Carolina QRF team, the second by the Arizona QRF team, including Vallejo. The third room was occupied by the Florida QRF team. These teams used the rooms to store and guard the firearms that they and other co-conspirators contributed to the quick response force. January 1st, Ulrich messaged James on Signal, "Hey, we told to bring guns and maybe stage them in Virginia, but you are showing hotels in DC for Alabama. Are we bring guns or no? If so, how will that work?" James responded, "We are working on farm location. Some are bringing long rifles, some sidearms. I'm bringing sidearm." On January 1 and 2, Rhodes spent approximately $5,000 on firearms and related equipment, including a shotgun, scope, magazines, sights, optics, a bipod, a mount, a case of ammunition, and gun cleaning supplies. January 2nd, Watkins messaged the leadership chat about assigning roles to individuals on her team, including operating ham radios. On the morning of January 2nd, Megs messaged leadership chat, "Good call last night, lots covered. I'll get with NC team today and find out QRF location." On January 2nd, Rhodes messaged Megs on Signal, "If you want to stow weapons with the operational leader, you can. He'll have a secure car trunk or his hotel room or mine." Megs responded, "Last night call, we discussed a QRF RP, so we may do that, as well as the NC team has a hotel room close by." Rhodes messaged, "Okay, we will have a QRF. This situation calls for it." On January 2nd, Caldwell received a message from the North Carolina QRF team leader stating, "FLA, 2 men back, 12 to 15 going in DC." On the evening of January 2nd, Megs posted a map of Washington, D.C. in the leadership chat along with the message, 1 if by land, north side of Lincoln Memorial, 2 if by sea, corner of West Basin and Ohio is a water transport landing. Megs continued, "QRF rally points, water of the bridges gets closed." In response, the North Carolina QRF team leader wrote, "My sources, D.C., working on procuring boat transportation as we speak." January 2nd, Caldwell sent messages to his contacts about seeking boats in support of the QRF. In one message, he said, "Can't believe I just thought of this. How many people, either in the militia or not, who are still supportive of our efforts to save the Republic, have a boat on a trailer that could handle a Potomac crossing? If we had someone standing by at a dock ramp, one near the Pentagon for sure, we could have our quick response team with the heavy weapons standing by, quickly load them and ferry them across the river to our waiting arms. If it all went to shit, our guy loads our weps and Blue Ridge militia weps and ferries them across." January 3rd, Megs added Harrelson to the leadership chat and wrote that Harrelson would serve as the ground team lead. Watkins and a co-conspirator discussed uniforms and weapons. Watkins, "We are not bringing firearms. QRF will be our law enforcement members of Oath Keepers." Co-conspirator, "Good to know." Watkins, "Pack khaki and tan pants. Weapons are okay now as well. Sorry for the confusion. We are packing the car and heading your way shortly." Co-conspirator, "We don't have any khakis. We have jeans and our BDUs. So can I bring my gun?" January 3rd, Megs messaged the leadership chat, "Ammo situation, are we bringing or are we set at QRF? I mean, I'm always going to have a couple hundred, but if SHTF, crap hits the fan, we got ample availability." The same day, Megs messaged the Florida signal chat, ammo situation I am checking on as far as what they will have for us if SHTF. I'm gonna have a few thousand just in case. If you got it, doesn't hurt to have it. No one ever said, shit, I brought too much. January 3rd, Rhodes departed Granbury, Texas, and began traveling to D.C. While traveling, he spent approximately $6,000 in Texas on an AR platform rifle and firearms equipment, including sights, mounts, triggers, slings, and additional firearms attachments. January 4th, Watkins asked the Florida signal chat, where can we drop off weapons to the QRF team? I'd like to have the weapons secured prior to the op tomorrow. Vallejo messaged Megs, Sir, Ed Vallejo of Arizona in Tennessee, with Cadre requesting coordinates to Allied encampment outside DC boundaries to rendezvous. Please respond ASAP. For the Republic. Caldwell sent an email to the North Carolina QRF team with the subject line, New maps relative to hotel and ingress for QRF, and attached several maps as image files. While still traveling towards Washington, D.C., Rhodes spent approximately $4,500 in Mississippi on firearms equipment, including sights, mounts, an optic plate, a magazine, and various firearms parts. Between January 1st and 5th, Rhodes, Megs, Harrelson, Watson, James, Hackett, Marshall, Ulrich, and Vallejo, and other co-conspirators transported firearms, ammunition, and related items to the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. January 5th, Harrelson messaged the Florida signal chat and asked for the location of the QRF hotel. Megs responded by asking for a direct message. Vallejo text messaged Megs, Sir, this is Ed Vallejo. We must have copied your number incorrectly. We have not received response to our text requesting campground address. We made it as far as Wytheville, Virginia, and had to get a room. Please text location so we will know where to begin in the morning. Thank you kindly. Megs responded with a text message providing the address of the Comfort Inn, Ballston. January 5th, Megs and co-conspirators were unloading their weapons. He messaged Rhodes, yes, we are just outside of town unloading at QRF on our way in. Left the North Carolina Oathkeeper leader's place at 4:30 a.m. Caldwell, using Google Maps on his mobile device, mapped a route between the Capitol building and an address 1 block from the Comfort Inn, Ballston. Caldwell and others drove into Washington, D.C. around the Capitol and back to their hotel in Virginia. Caldwell described the trip as a recce or reconnaissance mission. James dropped off firearms and ammunition that he, Ulrich, and other co-conspirators had transported to the Hilton Garden Inn in Vienna, Virginia, where Rhodes, James, Menuda, and others were staying. January 5th, Megs, Harrelson, Hackett, Marshall, Caldwell, and others provided the QRF, including Vallejo, with firearms, ammunition, and related items. January 6th. At approximately 6:27 a.m., Rhodes messaged the leadership signal chat. We will have several well-equipped QRFs outside DC, and there are many, many others from other groups who will be watching and waiting on the outside in case of worst-case scenarios. 8:30 a.m., Rhodes, the operation leader, and others departed a hotel in Virginia for Washington, D.C., drove to the Capitol area. Vallejo and others were on standby at the Comfort Inn, Ballston, monitoring communications from the co-conspirators on the ground inside Washington, D.C., and awaiting a call to bring the weapons to the co-conspirators. On a podcast that morning, Vallejo and an Arizona QRF team member discussed the possibility of an armed conflict and guerrilla war and explained that there are people who are prepared, have the will, have the facilities to do more than taunt. Caldwell and others marched to the Capitol, ultimately to the west side. Harrelson and another member of Stack 1 went to the Capitol in advance of the rest of Stack 1. Other members of Stack 1 equipped themselves with communication devices and reinforced vests, helmets, goggles, and other tactical gear. Then they marched to the Capitol, ultimately to the east side. Stack 2, consisting of James, Menuda, and Ulrich and others, equipped themselves with battle apparel and gear, including hard-knuckle tactical gloves, tactical vests, ballistic goggles, radios, chemical sprays, a paracord attachment, fatigues, goggles, scissors, and a large stick, and one of Stack 2's members, 82-pound German Shepherd named Warrior. Stack 2 sped to the area near the Capitol on golf carts and then marched onto the Capitol grounds, ultimately to the east side. Just before 1:30, on the leadership intel chat, in response to a claim by an Oath Keepers affiliate that Antifa had breached the Capitol, Rhodes replied, "Nope, I'm right here. These are patriots." Rhodes then messaged the leadership signal chat, "Pence is doing nothing, as I predicted." Rhodes added, "All I see Trump doing is complaining. I see no intent by him to do anything. So the patriots are taking it into their own hands. They've had enough." And if this should not dispel rumors that Antifa was involved, whatever Antifa is, I'm not really getting into that, but Rhodes here confirms that the people he saw were not some false flag operation by the opposition, but rather what he calls patriots. Approximately 1:30 p.m., Oath Keepers affiliates on the leadership intel chat posted messages about police officers deploying pepper spray at the Capitol and questioned what the rioters hoped would happen if they got inside the Capitol. A person with Rhodes at the time responded, "We are acting like the founding fathers, can't stand down. Per Stewart and I concur." Rhodes followed, "Hey, the founding generation stormed the governor's mansion in Massachusetts and tarred and feathered his tax collectors, and they seized and dumped tea in water. They didn't fire on them, but they street fought. That's where we are now. Next comes our Lexington. It's coming." Shortly before 2 p.m. on the invitation-only signal group chat titled Jan 56 DC Op Intel Team, which included Rhodes, James, and others, a participant posted a link to a video titled Live Stream of Patriots Storming Capitol. Another participant asked, "Are they actually patriots, not those who were going to go in disguise as patriots and cause trouble?" Rhodes responded, "Actual patriots. Pissed off patriots, like the Sons of Liberty were pissed off patriots." James followed with, "We're coming to Capitol ETA 30 minutes. Around this same time, while Meggs, Watkins, Hackett, Marshall, and others were marching towards the Capitol, Watkins made an announcement on the Stop the Steal J6 channel on Zello, an application that emulates push-to-talk walkie-talkies over cell phone networks. Quote, "It has spread like wildfire that Pence has betrayed us, and everybody's marching on the Capitol. We have 30 to 40 of us. We are sticking together and sticking to the plan." At 2 p.m., Watkins stated on the Stop the Steal Zello channel, "Y'all, we're 1 block from the Capitol right now. I'm probably going to go silent when we get there because I'm going to be a little busy." Shortly after 2 p.m., Harrelson and a co-conspirator joined the mob that first breached the barricades on the east side of the Capitol and rushed towards the steps that led up to the east side rotunda doors. The co-conspirator with Harrelson maneuvered his way to the front of the crowd and pulled on the arm of one of the Capitol police officers who had reassembled a police line on the steps to try and keep the crowd at bay. The officer pushed the co-conspirator away. Harrelson and the co-conspirator remained on the steps as the crowd pushed the police line further back up the steps toward the east side rotunda doors. At around 2:12 p.m., Rhodes entered the restricted Capitol grounds on the northeast side of the Capitol. At 2:14 p.m., the operational leader wrote to the leadership chat, "They have taken ground at the Capitol. We need to regroup any members who are not on mission." 2:21, Meggs, Watkins, Hackett, Marshall, and others unlawfully entered the restricted Capitol grounds. Shortly thereafter, the group paused and gathered in a circle. 2:24, while staged at the Comfort Inn Ballston, Vallejo messaged the leadership signal chat, "Vallejo, back at hotel and outfitted, have 2 trucks available. Let me know how I can assist." Rhodes called Meggs, but the call went to voicemail. Rhodes sent Meggs a message stating, "Go to south side of U.S. Capitol," followed by another message stating, "That's where I'm going to link up with the operation leader." 2:25, Rhodes forwarded the operation leader's message, "They've taken ground at the Capitol," and instructed his co-conspirators come to the south side of Capitol on steps, and then sent a photograph showing his location on the east side of the Capitol. Shortly thereafter, Meggs, Watkins, Hackett, Marshall, and others continued walking northbound along the exterior of the Capitol and then entered the plaza in front of the east side of the Capitol. 2:32 p.m., Meigs, Watkins, Hackett, Marshall, and others stood in a group on the East Plaza in front of the Capitol. 2:35 p.m., they joined together to form Stack 1 and maneuvered in an organized fashion up the steps to the east side rotunda doors, each member keeping at least one hand on the shoulder of the other in front of them. Harrelson joined Stack 1 when it reached the top of the steps. At the top of the steps, Stack 1 pushed forward as part of a mob that aggressively advanced toward the rotunda doors, assaulted the law enforcement officers guarding the doors, threw objects, and sprayed chemicals towards the officers and the doors, and pulled violently on the doors. 2:38 p.m., Vallejo messaged the leadership chat, "QRF standing by at a hotel, just say the word." 2:39 p.m., a member of Stack 1 joined the crowd in forcibly pushing against one of the rotunda doors and the law enforcement officers guarding that door. The mob then breached the doors, and the Stack 1 member entered the building. Shortly after the mob breached the rotunda doors, Meigs, Harrelson, Watkins, Hackett, Marshall, and others forced their way through the doors into the Capitol. As they entered the Capitol, they and others joined the larger mob in pushing past at least one law enforcement officer who was trying to stop the attack on the Capitol. After penetrating the Capitol, they moved into the rotunda. As they navigated through the rotunda, they remained in stack formation by keeping their hands on each other's backs. 2:44 p.m., Watkins stated on the Zello channel, "We are in the mezzanine. We are in the main dome right now. We are rocking it. They are throwing grenades. They are frickin' shooting people with paintballs, but we are in here." In response, another member of the channel said, "Get it, Jess? Do your effing thing. This is what we effing something up for. Everything we effing trained for." Shortly thereafter, Watkins and other members of Stack 1 exited the rotunda through the northbound hallway toward the Senate chamber. Around this time, a member of Stack 1 yelled, "The fight's not over," and waved rioters down the hallways towards the Senate chamber. At 2:45 p.m. and afterwards, Watkins and other Stack 1 members joined the mob in pushing against a line of law enforcement officers guarding the hallway connecting the rotunda to the Senate chamber. As Watkins commanded those around her to push, 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 and to get in there, while exclaiming, "They can't hold us." When officers responded by deploying a chemical spray, the mob, including Watkins and other Stack 1 members, retreated. 2:45 p.m., Meigs, Harrelson, Hackett, Marshall, and other Stack 1 members walked southbound out of the rotunda and toward the House of Representatives in search of Speaker Pelosi. They did not find Speaker Pelosi. Thank goodness. Meanwhile, Caldwell, who was positioned on the west side of the Capitol, joined with others in storming past barricades and climbing stairs up to a balcony in the restricted area on the west side of the Capitol building. At 3:09 p.m., another individual messaged the leadership chat that the news is reporting Congress given gas masks and trying to get out. Rhodes responded, "F 'em," before posting a photograph of people storming the Capitol. Stack 2. Between 2 p.m. and 2:30 p.m., James, Menuda, Ulrich, and others discussed the fact that individuals had breached the Capitol. Menuda stated words to the effect of, "Now we're talking, that's what I came up here for." James then instructed the group to get their gear and get ready to head to the Capitol. The group departed their hotel and headed toward the Capitol. Between 2:30 and 2:33 p.m., they and others rode in golf carts towards the Capitol, at times swerving around law enforcement vehicles, with Menuda live streaming their conduct over Facebook and stating, "Patriots are storming the Capitol building. There's violence against patriots by the DC police, so we're en route in a Grand Theft Auto golf cart to the Capitol building right now. It's going down, guys. It's literally going down right now. Patriots storming the Capitol building. Effing war in the streets right now. Word is, they got in the building. Let's go." At 2:33 p.m., James, Menuda, and Ulrich parked their golf carts near the Capitol, then marched toward the Capitol and entered the restricted areas of the Capitol grounds. When they arrived, they joined together to form Stack 2 and maneuvered their way through the crowd by keeping their hands on each other's shoulders or gear, eventually moving around the Capitol building and toward the east side. Menuda, with James, Ulrich, and others of Stack 2 standing nearby, aggressively berated and taunted law enforcement officers who were guarding the perimeter of the Capitol building and threatened the officers that they were outnumbered. Shortly after 3 p.m., James told Stack 2 members something to the effect of, "They're going in over there, let's go, let's get up there." James then led Menuda, Ulrich, and the other members of Stack 2 up the central steps on the east side of the Capitol. At 3:15, James, Menuda, and one other member of Stack 2 forcibly entered the Capitol building through the same east side rotunda doors that Stack 1 entered about 35 minutes earlier. Before entering, James stated, "We're going in," and Menuda responded, "Hell yeah." When he entered the Capitol, Menuda was still armed with the chemical spray and other tactical gear. While entering the building, James and Menuda pushed past Capitol police officers who placed their hands on James and Menuda in unsuccessful attempts to stop them from advancing toward the rotunda. At 3:17, upon reaching the rotunda, James and Menuda joined alongside others in a mob, confronting and jostling with a line of law enforcement officers, which formed a barrier between the lobby and the rotunda. Menuda, standing behind James and recording the events with a camera, began yelling, "This is what's bound to happen. Just get out. Get out. Get these cops out. It's our effing building. Get 'em out. Get out." James grabbed the vest of J.M., a Metropolitan Police Department officer engaged in the performance of his official duties, and James pulled J.M. toward the mob. Other officers behind J.M. grabbed J.M.'s vest and pulled him back into the line of officers. While pulling J.M., James yelled, "Get out of my Capitol! Get out! Get out of my Capitol!" James fell backward and then jumped and pushed forward to the officers repeatedly, continuing to yell, "This is my effing building. This is not yours. This is my Capitol." Other members of the mob, including Menuda, began pushing James forward into the rotunda while James yelled, "Keep going." James and Menuda briefly breached into the rotunda. James was expelled by at least one officer who aimed chemical spray directly at James and multiple officers who pushed him out from behind. At 3:19, while exiting the Capitol through the same east side rotunda doors he had previously entered, Menuda yelled at a law enforcement officer. At 3:21, Ulrich and other members of Stack 2 entered the east side rotunda doors. At 3:30 p.m., Rhodes messaged the leadership signal chat, "Anyone in D.C. who is not tasked with a security detail, come to U.S. Capitol on the Supreme Court side. Come to Capitol on the northeast corner." After exiting the Capitol, Meigs, Harrelson, Watkins, James, Menuda, Hackett, Marshall, Ulrich, and others gathered with Rhodes just outside the Capitol. That evening, Rhodes, James, Vallejo, and others met at a restaurant in Vienna, Virginia to celebrate their attack on the Capitol and discuss next steps. Throughout the evening of January 6th, the co-conspirators discussed the need to continue fighting to stop the lawful transfer of presidential power. At 7:30, Rhodes messaged the leadership chat, "Thousands of ticked-off patriots spontaneously marched on the Capitol. You ain't seen nothing yet." Vallejo messaged the leadership chat, "We'll be back at 6 a.m. to do it again. We got food for 30 days. He added, "We have only begun to fight, and after action reports will be dated 1/21/21. Meigs added on the leadership chat, "We aren't quitting. We are reloading." Rhodes explained that patriots entering their own capital to send a message to the traitors is nothing compared to what's coming. On January 7th at 5:46 a.m., Vallejo messaged the leadership chat, "We are going to probe their defense line right now, 6 a.m. They should let us in. We'll see." At 5:54 a.m., he stated, "Departing for recon now. Stewart, call me when you're up." About 10 minutes later, Vallejo continued, "I'll depart when cleared by my commander, sir. Be well and peace be with you." It jumps to January 11th, so I guess Vallejo was never cleared. Watkins exchanged the following Facebook message with a co-conspirator. "I'm with you, Cap. Keep the faith. We will have our answers by the 20th. Watkins, we've been organizing a bug-out plan if the usurper is installed, something like 20-plus Oathkeepers going to Kentucky mountains on hundreds of acres apparently, be like the NVA and network tunnels. North Vietnamese Army. In the weeks after January 6th, Rhodes purchased a large volume of firearms and related equipment. January 10th, $6,000 on sights, bipods, scope, mounts, backpacks, gun grip, magazine pouch, other items. January 11th, Rhodes spent $1,500 on scopes, magazines, and other items. January 12th, Rhodes spent $7,000 on hundreds of rounds of ammunition, duffel bags, magazines, rifle scopes, a scope mount, a gun light, and other items. January 13th, Rhodes spent $1,000 on firearms parts. January 14th through 19th, $2,000 on firearms parts, mounts, magazines, scope leveler, targets, ammunition, a gun case, holsters, gun maintenance equipment, among other items. In the weeks after January 6th, James met with Rhodes in Alabama, collected what he referred to as all available firearms, and traveled to Texas where he stayed with Rhodes and others. January 10th, James sent Meggs a message asking if Meggs and other Florida Oath Keepers were coming to Texas. Meggs responded, FL stays home until shots fired. That same day, Ulrich messaged James on Signal that he and Rhodes should stay below the radar. January 12th, while in Texas, on the drive back to Arizona from D.C., an Arizona QRF team member messaged Rhodes, Hi, Stewart. I'm sure you're busy, but I wanted to let you know that Vallejo and I are here. We are excited to learn next steps and would like to know what we should be doing right now. On Inauguration Day, January 20th, James messaged another individual. After this, if nothing happens, it's war, Civil War 2.0. Around this time, Rhodes messaged others to organize local militias to oppose President Biden's administration. And that's the end of count 1. The other counts will not have such a lengthy factual background to them. Count 2 is conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, which is pretty accurately described by those facts. Count 3 starts to go into obstruction of an official proceeding and aiding and abetting. And count 4 then is conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging any duties. Count 5 is destruction of government property and aiding and abetting. Count 6 is civil disorder and aiding and abetting, and these start to get into individual counts as opposed to counts against the group or part of the group. Count 7 is civil disorder and aiding and abetting. Count 8 is assaulting, resisting, and impeding certain officers. Count 9 then is tampering with documents or proceedings. On January 6th, the FBI opened an investigation, and a grand jury subsequently opened an investigation. I think that was January 8th. Sometime on or after January 6th, Rhodes deleted from his cellular telephone certain media files and communications that showed his involvement in the conduct alleged herein. I thought this was an interesting charge. I did not realize, as in today I learned, that there is such a thing as tampering with a witness, victim, or an informant. In section C here, whoever corruptly alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record, document, or other object, or attempts to do so with the intent to impair the object's integrity or availability for use in an official proceeding, or otherwise obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding or attempts to do so, shall be fined, imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both. So that's interesting. So even though the charges weren't pending at the time, if they destroyed what would be evidence in a future criminal charge with the intent to hinder said future criminal charge, that's also a crime. So that was against Rhodes, and then they start to do this against the others. Meggs deleted from his cellular telephone certain files, communications that showed his involvement. Harrelson, same thing. James apparently instructed another person to do the same, make sure that all signal comms about the op have been deleted and burned. Count 13 is against Minuta. He discarded his cellular telephone and with it the documents and media files, etc. Same thing against Hackett, deleted from his cellular telephone. Marshall, deleted from his cellular telephone. Ulrich, deleted from his cellular telephone. Caldwell sent a video and subsequently unsent the message and then deleted photographs from his Facebook account. And that's it. That's the true bill by the foreperson of the grand jury, and then signed by Matthew Graves, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. So what a remarkable series of events that definitely fit the charges of seditious conspiracy, something that many of us have been waiting for a year now, after watching what happened on January 6th and really feeling it in my heart, as I do consider myself a man who loves his country, and seeing the attack on my country, it was heartbreaking. And as an attorney, I was a little bit impatient in waiting for some charges to be brought. We've seen the hundreds of charges brought against lighter offenses involved with the Capitol insurrection, but this is among the first, if not the first, charges of seditious conspiracy against a group that actually seemed to want to do violence. You saw Vallejo there was just itching, was impatiently waiting in the hotel room with the quick response force, waiting for the word to bring arms and men to the Capitol to fight with violence, with military level violence against the Capitol and the U.S. Congress. One thing that seems reassuring from this fact pattern was that their bark was worse than their bite. They seemed to be willing to only go so far, or able to only go so far. This could have been much worse. That's certainly not meant to cast any sort of lightening of it. My thoughts are not minimizing their offense, but at the same time, they could have brought the quick response force earlier, and they could have opened fire, and then that would have been an entirely different January 6th than what we saw. As it is, they're facing 20 years in prison and various fines. I'm hoping that they get the book thrown at them and serve most, if not all, of that 20 years. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think this is enough? Is this what we were waiting for people who did more than just walk into the building and look around? Should it have gone farther than this? Was it a good idea for the grand jury to be convened and investigate everything for a year, or should a prosecutor have brought charges right away? What I can tell you, one reason they might not have brought charges right away is that U.S. attorneys like to win their cases, and they generally don't bring charges until they are sure they have their whole case buttoned up and ready to go, so that there is a very good chance of conviction. Last I had heard, U.S. attorneys had something like a conviction rate of better than 2/3, even as high as 85% in places. So that's pretty good. And then, of course, the last question is, do you think this was incited by President Trump? Remember, the standard for incitement is incitement to imminent lawless action. And there were statements made by Trump and Giuliani on January 6th that seemed to direct people to go to the Capitol and fight like hell. Is that enough to say that this was partially or fully done at the direction of former President Trump? I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to our top supporters in January: John Steele, Gavin Barnard, Eevi, Spirit Bear, Benjamin Hitov, Ugly Grill, Torpedan, NotMike, ShadowTycho, Earthbound Star, TechTechPotato, Eric Tams, PureMagma, and the Blood-Soaked Survivors. You can support Lawful Masses on patreon.com/ljfrench, sponsus.com/law, through YouTube memberships, and through Floatplane subscriptions. Join me for our weekly live production stream on twitch.tv/lawfulmasses on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern US time. I hope everyone has a great week and a happy new year. I love you all. Bye.